40% of adults don't have a best friend, according to like the latest research from the spring of 2021. So if you don't have that one person, I mean, you're in good company. If anything, see what is it that I need? And am I getting that from the collective community in my life? So do I have a space in my life where I do feel very affirmed? Do I have a space where I feel intellectually challenged? Do I have a space where I can be vulnerable and trust that it's safe to be vulnerable here? Perhaps you get all of that from the collective in your community, and that has to be a way to be sufficient and build you up. And I do think it's special when you find that from the singular, but can you find a way to be satisfied with enjoying those things from a collective community?
Hello, hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Drop into this moment right here because we're about to get started on the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. I'm your host, Sahara Rose, ancient soul, modern body. And for the past 5.5 years, I've been tuning into this podcast every single week, sharing ways that you can make spirituality more grounded, relatable, and fun, because I believe the path to your highest self is through joy. And one of the ways I have cultivated the most joy is through my friendships, through community. This is something I really deeply stand for. This is why I created Rose Gold Goddesses, my sacred feminine mystery school, and why I stand so deeply for women, men, non-binary, all people to come together and be real with each other, create memories, share art, stories, wisdom, magic, because my greatest memories in this lifetime have always been with other people. And so many of us are deeply craving that connection. And specifically, I want to talk about female friendships here, because a lot of us in middle school and high school, we may have had more friends than we have right now, but then we experienced a lot of the drama, girls talking bad about each other, feeling left out, just all of the politics that can come in female friendships. And I feel like after being in high school and even college, we tend to focus more on our work, and it's a little bit harder to make friends as an adult. It's like, where are you going to meet all these people before you could just go to school and meet a bunch of people? Whereas now it's a lot harder, and people live in different parts of the city, the country, the world, and it takes a lot of energy to keep in touch. And there's social media, and you got to text and do Zoom calls with each other, and just be really clear and honest with yourself about what are the friendships I want to continue investing into, and what are the friendships that served a purpose in my life for some period of time and I'm ready to move on from. And I think that this gets a lot more complicated as well when we go on a spiritual journey, because then we're evolving and shifting so quickly that the people in our lives might not understand it. They might think we're weird, crazy, or we just might not find the same depth and value in the friendship. So a lot can come up in female friendships on top of that being a spiritual person. So this has been an area of real interest of mine. And I was on TikTok where I find a lot of the guests on this podcast. I'm like, ooh, I like your wisdom. And I found this beautiful woman, Danielle, and she was speaking about female friendship. She's a friendship expert. Like, this is what she focused on. She's written a book about it. And I just loved how she broke down so many common things that happen in female friendships, like jealousy, ghosting, how to navigate conflict, when it's time for friendship breakup, or when it's time to work through a situation that might be showing up. Like, all these really specifics that I know I have experienced. I really open up on this podcast and share some of situations with my friendships, and are really universal as well. So this episode has been one of my favorite yet on the podcast. I really think it's going to go down as like one of the most downloaded, because it's so needed right now. And we really break down female friendships in all forms, from just common situations that you might experience. And I actually was asking her for advice on different things that I have experienced too. I feel also as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of nuances in entrepreneurial friendships. Sometimes it's like you're friends, but are you like business friends, or are you actual friends? So we talk about that and so much more on this podcast. And I know you're going to get so much value from it and probably listen to it again. So I highly recommend also sharing this with your friends, because hello, we want to have better female friendships. We got to learn, because frankly, none of us have been taught to do this. And sometimes we just need to, have compassion for everyone where they are on their journey, and learn and share what we have learned and grown with, because that helps other people evolve as well. So I know you're going to just feel really seen and heard, and probably learn a lot more about even the ways that you have been showing up in female friendships through this episode. So without further ado, let's welcome Danielle to the High Self Podcast. And before we get started, I'd love to share with you this special offer. The greatest way that we can help balance and heal our nervous systems is through embodiment work. You see, we spend most of our times in our heads. We are constantly analyzing, trying to make sense of the world and predict the future. But what we really need to create the future that we want is to drop into our body's wisdom and understand what it's telling us. And that way we can bring about more healing and co-create the circumstances that we desire. And that really comes first from knowing our body's language. So I have created my free Goddess embodiment practice, which will allow you to drop into your body's wisdom in under 10 minutes. This is the perfect practice you can do if you have no prior experience to embodiment, or if you're already practicing yoga, meditation, maybe you're working out, but you want something a little bit more feminine and flowy to add to the end or beginning of it. This practice is for you. I play incredible music and I guide you through dancing and just really feeling the messages that your body has for you. And you're going to feel so different on the other side. People seriously say, I can't believe how amazing I feel in less than 10 minutes. And I'm so excited to see how it turns out for you. So if you're interested, head over to iamsaharrose.com/embodiment. Again, that's iamsaharrose.com/embodiment. And you can find that link in the show notes and download the practice. Without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Welcome, Danielle, to the Highest Self Podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yes. And the first question I would love to ask you is, what makes you your highest self?
Definitely, without a doubt, my friendships. I think being in communion with women I love and who love me back helps me to be my highest self.
So I found you on TikTok like 2 years ago, and I have just been obsessed with your content since, because the way that you talk about just such common yet unspoken about issues in friendships, it deeply resonated with me. And a lot of people listening to this podcast have been on a spiritual journey, and they might feel like they've outgrown a lot of friendships in their lives. They may feel lonely right now of not having aligned friends. And they also may have friendships that they're holding on to because they've known them for a really long time, or they work together or whatever else, but it's not serving them. And a common thing I've noticed in the spiritual community and in my audience is that fear of speaking your truth because you're afraid that it might hurt people. So I have lots of questions that I want to ask you about today, but really especially supporting people in, on spiritual journeys with their friendships, because I think that's one of the hardest things when you're diving into personal development work is like, not everyone else is. And sometimes you feel like you're leaving people behind.
Yeah, I love that you have queued it up and teed it up in that way, because those are all such important things. And I am rooting for the woman who's committed to self-development, spiritual development, and then, conflicted because she sees how that inevitably touches the relationships that she's cultivated up to that point. And so I know that woman is listening, and I'm ready for us to have a discussion that hopefully adds some value and clarity to her life.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about conflicts in friendships. There are a million books out there about how to navigate conflicts with your partner. And, when you're in a relationship with someone, you have the love and the sexual chemistry and all those things holding you together that you don't necessarily have with a friend. And what I've noticed is sometimes when conflict happens in friendship, we can be very quick to say, well, this person's not meant to be in my life. So what questions should we ask ourselves before discarding a friendship?
Yeah, this is tough because, I do think that there are a lot of perhaps cultural things that have brought us to a space where we have not yet normalized a bit of healthy conflict in our platonic relationships as well. And I think that we anticipate in our romantic relationships, there are tons of books, to your point, on how to get over the hump. It's assumed that we're going to have them and that we're going to have to communicate and get over them. But in friendship, I think we have this fantasy that I'll just get her, she'll just get me, things will be unspoken, I don't have to say my needs. And if there's any kind of tension or misunderstanding, that is evidence that we are not compatible. And it doesn't always work that way. And I get fearful for the woman who sees any kind of tension as a reason to leave or as evidence that this is not going to work out. So I appreciate you asking that question. When we're trying to figure out, okay, is it really time to leave? There are a couple things. One, if you feel like you've been with somebody for so long and the only reason you stay is because you feel an obligation to honor history. It's no longer fulfilling. It's not helping you grow. If anything, maybe it's emotionally depleting, but you feel like you got to stay because you've been friends for so long, or because she showed up for you during a certain period of your life and you feel like you have to honor that loyalty, that it would be disloyal to end the friendship because of that one time she was there for you. If that's the reason you're staying, I think that points to a need to maybe reevaluate that friendship. Because think about it from the other end. Would you want a friend who you found out she's only friends with you because she feels like she has to be? I mean, you'd say, oh my gosh, don't do me any favors. Like, please don't stay here if you feel like you have to. I don't want to bind you in that way. So that's one indicator. If there's any kind of constant lying and manipulation or guilting, things where you feel like you have to very carefully measure your words, or you can't be your full self because you'll be punished or judged or anything like that, I think that points to maybe a time for redirection. If there's some kind of major betrayal that you feel like you can't get beyond no matter how hard you try, because that will show up in other ways. We're going to start being a little passive aggressive or resentful, or you dread her texts and calls because you're still not over that one thing. I think some of these things point to maybe it's time for me to reevaluate this friendship.
Yeah. And even the being judged in friendship, I want to talk about that because it's inevitable in friendships. You're going to have different preferences, right? Like some people like to go out, some people like to stay in. So how do we even navigate those differences when we might feel like we're being judged? Like what's a healthy amount of, okay, I know this person might not love the way that I do this, or I don't love that I do that, and accepting versus maybe offering our opinion on it.
That's such a great point. I think this is, okay, so this is a bit of a nuanced response because one, you have to be confident in your choices. One, that's important because I've noticed that people who are not confident in themselves, their choices, or what it is they have to offer, that question mark, it's like they walk around with this question mark over their heads like a cloud, and you need it affirmed everywhere you go. And you have to kind of be confident and sure in your own compass, because a friend saying girl, you're still doing that, or, oh, you like that. Does it totally rattle you to have friends who disapprove, or they don't agree, or they don't share your lifestyle, or they would have chosen differently? Can you still be in communion with somebody who does not see certain things the way that you do? Or does it totally rattle your sense of self? That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, is it actual judgment or perceived judgment? So it goes back to, I feel like I'm being judged. I think a lot of times if you are insecure about a certain thing, you are going to feel judged everywhere because you're not sure about holding that position or view on something. So take care of that first. Now, some hard evidence we could point to is whenever you share an opinion or something like that, you have friends who speak to you in a condescending way, like, oh, you like that? Oh, you do that? I would never. Okay. This person doesn't affirm you who you are or allow you to have autonomy and allow you to have different choices. There's no room for differentiation there. And that is not okay. If you have a friend who finds out that you made a choice that she wouldn't have made about her life, so she withdraws in response to that, or belittles or condescends or questions in an attempt to convert or to change, do you feel like you have enough safety where you can shine differently and choose differently, and it's okay? Now, there is going to be some correction in close friendships where a friend says to me, Danielle, that girl, that was not okay. Or I want to ask you about this because I don't know how I feel about that. And we can safely engage in that kind of discourse. And I can either lean in to what she's sharing and say, okay, I never thought about it like that. You're right. Or I can say, you know what? No, after listening to you, I don't agree with that. And we're still okay. And so it takes a couple other things in an environment to feel that kind of emotional safety, to have diverging opinions or paths. But if you do feel like I really can't be myself here, then I think that points to something important.
And I think also knowing that we can have different friends for different sides of ourselves. And, we might have those friends that we love doing yoga with, and those friends that we love talking about TV shows with, and friends that we love going hiking with. So I feel like often in the media where we see this portrayal of like, you're my best friend and we're going to do everything and we're going to have everything in alignment. And then when there's one thing that you don't, then it's like, is this really my best friend? So how can we satisfy the different sides of ourselves through different types of friendships without feeling like, yeah, this idea that one friendship or a group of friends needs to, be my core group of friends and I can't go outside of that?
Yeah, I love you asking that because it gives us permission to explore what best friendship looks like. Now, this is not necessarily an idea that everyone adopts, but my position on best friends is that you don't always have to get everything you need from one person. If anything, it does kind of put a lot of pressure on that person. Now, I do acknowledge that some women have that. I think that's very beautiful to feel like, man, I found someone who is funny and she gets, all of my little quirks and she satisfies all these things for me. I think is really beautiful. But 40% of adults don't have a best friend, according to the latest research from the spring of 2021. So if you don't have that one person, you're in good company. If anything, see what is it that I need? And am I getting that from the collective community in my life? So do I have a space in my life where I do feel very affirmed? Do I have a space where I feel intellectually challenged? Do I have a space where I can be vulnerable and trust that it's safe to be vulnerable here? Perhaps you get all of that from the collective in your community, and that has to be a way to be sufficient and build you up. And I do think it's special when you find that from the singular, but can you find a way to be satisfied with enjoying those things from a collective community? But when I, first thought to that. And then once you open up to that idea, perhaps, you can be comfortable with getting all those things from different pockets of the world without putting the pressure on one person to sustain, satisfy, and affirm you in a bunch of different ways. If anything, there's research that shows that we benefit from having a lot of different people because we do show different sides of ourselves with different people. One activity I like to do with clients is, to have them to repeat the statement, I am blank, and to fill that in as many times as possible. I challenge them to 10 or 20 times. You're likely filling that out with different aspects of your identity. So for me, I am a mother. I am a woman. I am Black. All those things make me who I am. And then I encourage you to go to the spaces where you feel like those aspects of your identity are affirmed. Where do I feel like I can be a mom and women just get it? Or I can be an intellectual and people get it. I can be a woman and I feel like, yes, I feel more of a woman among this company. I feel so tuned into my womanhood here. So identifying those aspects of your identity should point you to where the spaces you should occupy to be among the people who can affirm that aspect of yourself.
That is such a good practice. And I think sometimes what happens is we take one of those things and we make that our core group of friends of I am a mother. So single people don't understand me. I can't be friends with people who aren't mothers. And then we discard the other friends. We're only friends with the mother friends, for example. And then we feel like we can't have those intellectual conversations or we can't do this. And we're missing all these different sides. And then we're trying to turn someone into something else. And I think that that's just such a great practice to see. And it's even not even so much of identity, but I am joyful. It's who are the friends that bring the joy out in me? I am intuitive. Who are the friends that I get to talk about intuition with me and even just different sides of our personalities and soul selves and reflecting that in friend groups.
Yes, totally agree. That's beautiful.
Yes. And I want to talk about this concept of best friends because I feel like it has so much pressure in our society. It's from the time you're a kid, you have the best friend bracelets and you're the other side of my heart. And if you don't have a best friend, it can feel lonely or is something wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And I heard someone say something funny of best friend is not a person, but a tier. Mm-hmm. And that women don't have necessarily one singular best friend, though they may, but it's often a tier of how close I am to you. So if we're best friends, for some people that might be their top 4 friends or even their top 10 friends. So what does the word best friend really mean to you in your research?
I've heard that before about the tier. And I love that so much, because I think it gives a lot of room to being able to engage with a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. It kind of gives you permission. On my podcast, the Friend Forward podcast, I did an episode on that talking about, okay, for some women, it is a singular individual. For some, it's, the collective. There's research on why we do feel this way so that we don't feel like we're just in our heads and it's just us. The number one thing that women prioritize in their female friendships is emotional support. And the second thing is prioritization, meaning if I feel like you're my number one. I kind of secretly expect that I'm your number one too. Like we like feeling like we're on the same wavelength, you and me. Also, we tend to get close through self-disclosure. So I'm sharing about my life with you, you're sharing with me. And eventually it feels like we're creating like this special sacred vault, you and I. Like you get me, you see me. And so the idea that you could duplicate this special thing somewhere else feels like it diminishes the value of what we have. And so I think that's why we really gravitate toward, one-to-one, because it feels so close and intimate. And our friendships they do have more platonic intimacy than men's friendships because we open up and we share and we're there for each other. And our friendships tend to be more dyadic, one-to-one, as opposed to men who will have like multiple friends. And so I could see how all of those things, when you add them up, it equals we're looking for that one woman who just gets it, And so again, I think that's a very special thing. And if that's a goal of yours, is to find somebody who you can really open up with and create something very special with, I think that's a lovely sentiment. I would just say, look at the ways that maybe limits or restricts your satisfaction of life, how it maybe skews some of your friend making journey. If you're looking for that one singular person to maybe kind of reevaluate what that looks like. Do you find that you get clingy and obsessive with one person and you're trying to create fast friendship and now you're neglecting all these other people in your life who bring you joy? So look at how it kind of, impacts a relationship. Do you currently have a best friend, but you find that you have so many expectations of her? Or if she goes and hangs out with other people, it really emotionally impacts you because you haven't nurtured other friendships. So I would say if you want to have a best friend or you have a best friend, just put your head on a swivel and look at the ways that holding that value is maybe indirectly impacting other relationships in your life.
That's such great advice. And one of the tricky things about best friends too is like, when do you decide you're best friends? It's like you're getting close with someone. It's like, it almost feels weird. It's like, are you my girlfriend? To be like, are we best friends? And then It's like putting a label on and that same pressure. And maybe for one person that is their number one, but you're not their number one. And I feel like it's just like a hard conversation to have. And then another thing you alluded to are the friendship expectations. Mm-hmm. And I know for some people, they have a lot of expectations of like, what does it mean to be in my inner circle? And this means we talk every single day and we do this and that. And for some people, they're a little bit more distant as friends and you might be best friends and not talk for months. I'd love to ask you from, just learning so much about so many different female friendships, how much should we verbally talk about our expectations versus them just kind of like naturally coming to be in a relationship? Like, should we be like, hey, now that we're best friends, like these are what my expectations are, or is that going to scare people away?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I don't get this question much, but I think it's so important. In terms of like when to have the expectations talk, I feel like when we bring it to the table, like it's a contract, it could feel formal. It could feel intimidating. It could
sign here.
Yeah. Exactly. Like here are my 10 expectations. Do you agree? I love the idea of bringing it up as it comes along, unless you know that there's something that you feel like up front is so urgent and so important that people need to know from the beginning and you determine that for yourself. Okay. But I like the idea of bringing it up as it happens so that it feels organic. So maybe I have a friend who texts me a lot. I mean, like all the time. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that is a lot. For me personally, that is a lot. So maybe in this moment, I lovingly say to her, like, hey, just a heads up. If you find that I'm really delayed on text, it's not personal, but I've noticed that I'm kind of like a check-in once a week kind of gal. So I just wanted to throw that out there so we're on the same page. It's not, it doesn't make her feel like she got lectured. Hopefully it doesn't embarrass her, but it helps to align our expectations. So maybe she still is the type who likes to touch daily. That's still her. But at least now she has data that can help her understand how to interpret my response so that she doesn't internalize that. Oh, Danielle must be mad at me. Oh, Danielle must not be interested. I guess she's not responding back. And it's like, oh no, I have a bit of a lower touch style. And so she can keep being herself. I can keep being myself. But at least now we've kind of like bridged the gap a little bit. And hopefully if we find value in the friendship, keep moving forward together. So I think organically bringing it up when it happens, is a more natural way to address it. As opposed to writing it all down and letting people know what all your expectations are, which can kind of make it feel like a boss employee dynamic. Like, here are the rules and I just want to let you know. As opposed to, hey, here's how I feel loved. Here's where I'm thriving. These are the things that really make me feel great. And when it comes to boundary setting, I like to suggest that we kind of do it that way to talk about what you really, really like. And, the meta message there, like the subtext is that you don't like these things. So instead of, for example, hey, I don't like when people, call me late at night. I don't like that when you're blowing up my phone after 9. Like, please don't do that. Can feel so restrictive and stiff, and feel like a correction instead of like, hey, so I know that I'm really best on the phone, like before 6, like my brain is alert and I am alive. And so, if you want to call me before 8, I'm telling you now, that's when you're going to get my best. And so I'm redirecting you toward what I really like and come join me over here. The implication is that I dislike the opposite. And so I think when it comes to setting expectations, doing it in a loving, matter-of-fact way might be better for people to receive.
I love that of how you're saying, instead of please don't contact me after 9 p.m., it's in this really friendly and compassionate way saying, I'm really at my best before 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. So it's giving them through love rather than through punishment. So another question I have for you is friendships in triages. I think sometimes that gets really tricky in my own experience. And, it has even happened in my own life of there was like 4 of us and then one kind of fell out and then there were 3 of us and it worked for a really long time. But there was always this like, oh, they're hanging out without me. And are they getting closer? Are they talking about me? And like a little bit of that fear. And eventually the triage just did not work. So I'm curious if you've noticed this dynamic among women just doesn't work because of the one-on-one reciprocal like nature of the feminine, or how it can work.
Okay. So exactly what you just said about our nature is to have that very special sacred vault, one-to-one dyads. You talk to me, I talk to you. And there's new research that finds that most of us, more than half of us hang out in a one-to-one setting. So that's what we do. Why? Because it's easier to coordinate hanging out. Are you free? Are you free? It's easier to determine reciprocity. I gave, so you gave. I talk, so you talk. It seems easier to balance and we know where we stand. And then 18% of us congregate regularly as trios and 9% as 4. So on and so forth. So it's more common to be in a pair because it seems easier to facilitate and to navigate like how we're going to gradually deepen this relationship. And I can identify more easily when things seem off balance.
Yeah. With 3, you almost need like a facilitator.
Yeah.
Of like, did you speak? Did you speak? And it just takes a lot more planning and work. And I think that adds a formal dynamic to it.
Absolutely. And so, I know, trios, successful trios to be true. I've seen it and women have it and they do just fine. I do think there are a lot of things that have to be in place for a trio to be successful. One is I think you need to have a relatively secure attachment style so that you're not panicky and anxious whenever they do text without you or whenever they do get coffee and you weren't invited. Are you automatically going to like, oh my gosh, they hate me. They're talking about me. Why didn't they invite me? What does that say? If you are likely to go there, I think, yes, friendship trios are going to be a very challenging dynamic for you, maybe mentally and emotionally. So you have to be secure. The second is you have to understand that there are going to be varying degrees of closeness throughout the trio. So maybe they met in high school and they're like 3 degrees closer than they are with you. Is that okay? Can you find a way for that to be okay? Or is that always going to bother you because you're trying to maintain a perfect equality across the board of 3? That might drive you nuts. So I think that's kind of tricky too. And then finally, I think you have to have friends outside of the trio because if these 2 are your everything, it is going to hit a little harder if they do talk without you, or if they are clicking this week because they both left their jobs at the same time. So they are kind of bonding over this life season right now. And I have to be okay with that. And if not, it helps to kind of buffer it by having other friendships as well. So it can be done, but if you're experiencing hardship in the trio, I totally would understand why.
Yeah. And I think a tough thing that happens in trios is when there is a conflict, it's more likely that 2 people are going to be more on the same side as the other. Then the third person's just going to feel ganged up against, which if their 2 best friends are agreeing, that kind of feels like the end of the world, and then that might make someone just completely discard and remove themselves. So I feel like managing conflict does require just a lot more self-responsibility and, compassion for one another and conversation. And that brings me back to, how to navigate really conflict in friendships, and attachment styles. So I've noticed, just like attachment styles in relationships, we have them in friendships. Some of us tend to be a little bit more on the anxious side of when something's, there's a conflict brewing. We want to talk, like I'm more of this. I want to talk about it. I want to know how you feel. Like I want to know that we're good. Like I want to be thinking about it all the time. So it like puts me at ease for us to just talk about it right now. And for other people, they need their time. They need their space. They're like, don't contact me for a week. I need to go and really think about this. And then I'm going to come back and let you know. And I think just the way that life works, we often end up in the opposite pairs. So how do we navigate this while, I think we're all striving to be secure, but have you noticed we still tend to fall on one of those sides, even if it's not as much?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I'll stay in my lane, but I do know that a lot of how conflict was a thing in our home, I think that impacts, how we show up in friendship. And I just think the nature of friendship itself too. I heard, Dr. Marissa Franco, who's a friendship expert and psychologist, and the way that she describes attachment styles really resonates with me. She says it's about what you project onto moments of ambiguity says a lot, and that there's a lot of ambiguity in friendship. So one example she gave is, let's say you're sitting at an event, you're waiting for your friend to show up, you turn around, you see her walk in, you get excited, and she goes and sits somewhere else, and you sage her a seat. What do you think in that moment? Is your first thought, oh my gosh, what is she mad at me? Like, what the heck? Let me text her. Are we okay? Are you mad at me? Let me go follow her and see what's going on. That might be more anxious. Is it, oh, okay, so she sees me and she's not even going to sit here. You know what? That's fine. Like, I don't even need her to sit here. I'm fine. That might be a little more on the other end of the spectrum, avoidant. Both of those are fearful of rejection. They just respond to it in different ways. I'm scared I'm going to be rejected, so let me go and cling and press harder. I'm scared I'm going to be rejected, so let me push her away first. I'll be fine. And then they're securely attached, where I assume during this moment of ambiguity, oh, maybe she didn't see me. Let me text her and make sure she knows I'm up front. I feel okay about it. I trust that she didn't mean anything by it, and it doesn't mean being naive. It just means the benefit of the doubt, and that I believe that I have something to offer in friendship. So I'm not questioning myself and who I am whenever something happens. Is she mad? Am I awful? Finally she lost interest in me. Of course, people always lose interest in me. Like, I trust that I have something to offer, and I trust other people to give me love. And that's what it comes down to. And so when it comes to conflict in friendship, I wonder how much of it is the nature of friendship itself, that we don't have these formal contracts, that we don't have these milestones to celebrate, that we're not having conversations about, are we exclusive? Are we not? So much of it is ambiguous that I think it does allow for there to be more room of like, hold on, what's going on? What did you mean by that? And then do we have the kind of security where we can bicker or disagree, but I'm not totally fretting because I know we're going to be okay. But have we established that we're going to come back around and reconcile? Or is it like oh gosh, there's a little, fissure here. I guess this is the beginning of the end, and so as much as we can kind of make it normal to disagree, to maybe have a little awkward moment, I'm inevitably going to hurt your feelings, unintentionally, because I'm a person who lets people down sometimes, and I forget things, or, is there room for you to make mistakes? Or do we see mistakes as evidence of, I shouldn't be here. You're a bad friend. I knew it. I think that one thing we do that I don't think is the best is something that's called fundamental attribution error. And so whenever another person makes a mistake, we attribute it to their character instead of a circumstance. So one example people often give is if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off, instead of thinking like, oh, they might be, late, or maybe they didn't see me. It's, oh my God, she's so rude. People are so rude these days. How could you do that to another person? How could you be so thoughtless and selfish? And so I think when our friends make these mistakes, are we going to like, wow, I didn't realize she was kind of selfish. That was kind of rude. Instead of like, okay, I don't know what happened today to make her kind of pop off at me on the phone just now. I'm going to assume she's having a bad day. And later I'm going to come and ask her, hey, are we good? Because you seemed really tense on the phone. That's not like you. Like what's happening? As opposed to, wow, that was so rude. And she's so selfish. And I don't know that I can be friends with a woman who's selfish like that. we go all the way over there. And so I think kind of having curiosity, making room to have tension, showing that you value reconciliation and talking it out has to be normal for us to be able to recover a lot of these friendships that I would argue end prematurely because we don't know how to navigate conflict in a healthy way.
We'll take a quick break so I can share with you this special offer. So have you been on your spiritual journey for a while, but to be honest, you don't resonate with a lot of the practices, like hours of seated meditation or reading all these really heady spiritual books, but instead you're craving something that invites the full you, that allows you to be radiant and beautiful and connecting with your intuition and womb wisdom? Well, I felt the exact same way on my spiritual journey. I went from spending hours doing really rigid Ashtanga yoga every year, where I actually lost my period for over 2 years and even went into perimenopause in my early 20s, into connecting back with my sacred feminine energy. And this is exactly what I share in my new course, Divine Feminine Embodiment. So this is really about dropping out of the mind and into the body, because the truth is a lot of the spiritual practice that we hear about right now really were created by men for men. And our culture is very masculine as well. It's very focused on productivity and hustle. And if you're ready to go beyond that and reclaiming your ease, your joy, your bliss, your juiciness, your dance, then this course is for you. So I discuss the different art forms of divine feminine wisdom, such as the art of magnetism, the art of embodiment, the art of ritual, and so much more. So this is also a really powerful entry point into stepping into deeper sacred feminine work. I teach you my goddess embodiment practice, my goddess breathwork practice, and much more. So if you're interested and curious to learn more about what's inside, head over to divinefemininecourse.com. Again, that's divinefemininecourse.com. You can find that link in the show notes. This month, the course is over 50% off as our special introductory price. So I highly recommend diving into it right now and beginning your sacred feminine immersion. You're so right in what you said about how friendships, we don't have those milestones. We don't have the container. We don't have the conversation that we do in relationships, that there's so much ambiguity and there's so much unsaid, which we attach our own story to, of how we see the world. And, you know, that friend not sitting with us, however you see the world and you see yourself, that's going to be the story of it. And I think also what happens too is we project that the way that we feel about our own lives on that other person of, oh, like, this person's not sitting with me. They must just be so jealous of me. And like, we go off into that story, or, you know, however we're oftentimes feeling, we mirror that exact perception on someone else. So how can we deal with conflict if someone is projecting their own insecurities on you?
Yeah, that's tough. If you notice that you feel like a friend is coming at you with stuff and you're like, okay, where is this coming from? I feel like this is her insecurity, whatever. I always say to address things with as much invitation as possible instead of accusation, because no one responds well to that. So instead of, I feel like you're being a little jealous, which by the way, that has never helped any friendship ever by saying that, but by saying like, I feel like you're jealous, or like, I feel like you're just projecting. I feel like a person's first natural inclination is, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? We're not going to get anywhere. But being able to point to tangibles and talking about the impact of their behavior, I have found to be more fruitful. So instead of saying like, I feel like you're jealous because, you came at me during, lunch the other day, or I talked about my promotion and I didn't hear you say congratulations. Like, were you jealous or something? Instead, it's going to be, I take her one-on-one, not in front of an audience, and say, hey, are you good? Are we good? Because I noticed that I shared XYZ the other day, and I noticed you responded in this tangible way. And it made me feel like there was like a disconnect between us. So I just wanted to make sure, like, am I reading into it, or are we good? Because it shows her, I see it, because some people stop whenever they notice that you notice. It shows concern. Like, I'm genuinely wondering, because that is so not like you. Are we good? And it shows her that I want to be in communion with you. I want to be in fellowship with you. So let's make sure that we're on the same page about this issue before it festers. Because a lot of us, when we sense that maybe somebody's projecting on us, we go and tell other people. did you see what she did yesterday? Like, is she jealous or something? And then we build up the story so that by the time we go back to her, we don't have a heart to even reconcile or to like approach her with love because we've been like getting hyped up by the squad, and now we're coming to her like ready to fight. So, I feel like, and also, we say this a lot, but having grace with another person, sometimes it really isn't about you. I mean, I think we know that intellectually, but like getting that printed on your heart, it is not about you. If a friend is jealous, it might be because she feels like you having is the reflection of her lacking. If you got this job, you got this man, you got this man, what does that say for me? And she doesn't understand that like, yeah, I can have, and there's enough room for you to have too. Me having doesn't mean you lacking, but it's really about you, the person. And so, yeah, so it's hard when friends project. And if you find that she is sabotaging the friendship, or you feel like you can't share your wins, you have to kind of dim your light a little bit because you don't want her to be uncomfortable. That really, really says something, about the friendship, that you feel like you cannot do that without being penalized in some kind of way.
I think we've all felt that. We've felt, that feeling of projection and I think, yeah, definitely if you tell someone, well, you're just jealous of me, you're never going to get anywhere. And that person's just going to take the opposite side and you're not going to, I think sometimes we have to think, what is our end goal? And like, if our end goal really is resolution, that's the tough thing for me. It's like, sometimes how much of my truth should I really share? And how much should I just come from a place of just compassion, seeing their side and letting it go. So let's say you had a conflict and they said some things that they didn't like about you. How much should you be like, well, if that's how they feel about me, then I don't know if I feel safe in this friendship, versus, you know what, they were in a place of conflict and a place of pain and that's what they said. And maybe they didn't mean it. And let's just like move on and resolve this friendship.
Yeah, that's so tricky, right? Because it's hard. I think it's hard with friends, especially female friends, because there's so much of you as a woman who mirrors me as a woman, and it's so intimate in that way. And so it's like, if a woman rejects you, it feels more painful for some reason, because it's like, you are me, I am you. And so if I'm not good enough here or accepted here, it feels more painful. If a friend tells you like, I don't like this about you, I don't like that about you. Well, the first thing I would question her motive or tell her to explain to me, what is the objective? So if it's to cut me down, so it's like, I think you think you're all that, and I don't like your tone, and I think you're judgmental. My question would be, are you telling me this because as a friend, you feel like me doing these things is getting in the way of us being close? Or you feel like what is the point? Because if the point is taking pleasure in humbling me, that says something, as opposed to you're correcting me right now because you're concerned about the path I'm going down, because you've noticed that I have a certain attitude or something that's getting in the way of us being friends, and you can't trust me anymore. And so the goal is, let me make it known because I want to bring us close, or because I'm nervous about the path you're going down. That's different than, let me tell you about yourself because I think you need to be humbled. And we only do that to people who are shining brightly. I mean, you wouldn't tell somebody else they think they're all that, they're too good, if you already kind of see them as lowly or humble or mediocre. We only offer that kind of feedback to people we think are shining too brightly to bring them down a peg. So that already says something right there. But I would ask them, what's the point? Okay. And then telling me all that, what's the point? I'm just trying to understand, and calling it out, because I'd be so curious about how they respond to that. Well, I'm letting you know because I'm just concerned. I'm seeing danger ahead for you if you keep up with that attitude. Oh, so you're concerned about me. Or is it just well, I don't know. I just feel like you're getting a big head, or you think you're too good. I don't think I'm too good. You think I think I'm too good. That has nothing to do with me. So asking people their motivation right up front, I think is helpful in making them process in their own brain and say it out their own mouth, having to reason. And a lot of times we're not pushed to do that. If you have a friend who gives you feedback that's difficult, one, it's okay to agree to disagree. It's okay to say, okay, I don't see that. I really don't, but I hear you. I do. I hear you. It's okay. It's okay. Number two, to take time to process. I think a lot of pressure comes from feeling like you have to respond right now and you have to know the right thing to say. It's okay sometimes to say, okay, well, I didn't know you felt that way. And I gotta be honest with you. I think I need some time to process how I feel before I even respond to you. And give yourself a break. Give yourself a week to process those feelings, because the first thing out of your mouth might be something you regret, or that you can't totally commit to later. So it's okay to ask for time to process. But if you do sense that generally you have a friend who is telling you quote unquote constructive criticism, but the objective is to humble you, I would understand if you didn't feel emotionally safe there to shine and to show up as your full self.
And I think sometimes people mix these two intentions up, that they're like, I'm trying to humble you because I care about you. And it's like, well, which one is it? Or I'm here to be your mirror because no one else can. And I think sometimes we enter that tricky territory of like, are you being my coach or my friend? And I see this happen to, a lot of my friends. We actually are coaches. Like that's what we do. And with one of my friends, we ask each other, like, are we in the container? And that's kind of like the question of, okay, we're stepping into, I'm going to be asking you questions that are a little bit more coaching questions rather than just like showing up as your friend. And so we kind of ask each other for that. So what would you do if someone is like, you know what, Danielle, I'm going to be the mirror for you because no one else is. I think you're XYZ, and they have this feedback for you that kind of was unsolicited. How would you respond in this?
Yeah, that's tricky. And I was going to ask you, what your experience is of having a circle of people who do guide and coach, and what that means as a friend when it's like, oh, I don't want to be coached. I just need you to like love on me right now. I don't want to be pointed and challenged. Yeah, it's tricky. If you have someone who is telling you things and you didn't ask, I just kind of would go back to what I said before about like asking them, oh, okay. So something's going on where you feel the need to share that, like you feel prompted and compelled to express that. What's going on? And asking them like, where did that come from? Especially if it's unsolicited. And I really just enjoy the main strategy of making people explicitly say out of their mouth what the point was. And if you don't trust the reason that they offer you, oh, I'm just trying to be a mirror, I'm just trying to be helpful. Sometimes we don't even have to express. If you feel like you've seen enough evidence over time that this person secretly takes delight in telling you things that are not helpful, like you can't take that feedback and actually grow with it. It was meant to kind of chip away and bring you down a notch. Then at some point, you might find that it's not fruitful to keep like contending with them. And that might be something where you have three options. One, you reduce the frequency with which you see this person, because I've noticed that some friendships can survive if they're in lesser doses. So the frequency. Your second option is recategorization, where you think to your mind, okay, I've been having her on like the top number one shelf of friendship in my mind. I don't think I can do that anymore because I'm seeing I can't bring her these things. But man, I love brainstorming with her as like an entrepreneur friend. I think I'm going to have to take her off shelf number one and just reserve her as my fun business friend on shelf number three, and no longer bring her these things because they're not safe here. Or three, withdraw from the friendship completely if for some reason you feel like it's severe enough that you are really being like tainted in some way by consistently being her company. So, you have options. I know we tend to go from like stay besties or cut her off, but there are some things in the middle. There are some options that make it so that if her friendship does add value to your life, you can still sustain it. But if you find that you have to shrink yourself to be accepted here, I think that points to something more important.
Yes, I love that, of looking at the intentions, and maybe it's not an all or nothing, but it's just a recategorization. Mm-hmm. And yeah, your question about what is it like to be friends with everyone who's a coach or a guide. I think what happens often in these circles is there's an element of competition that I've noticed of how's your coaching practice going? Oh, you did a launch like this. And, kind of looking at people sometimes of like, what can you do for me? Like, are we going to collab? Are we going to be on each other's podcasts? Are we going to this? So it's like either like they're interested in you because of the opportunity that you provide. Like it's sometimes hard for me too, because when I meet friends, they're like, oh, you have a podcast. And then they kind of start pitching themselves to me to be on the podcast. So it's like this sort of like, do you want to be my friend or do you want to use my platform? And then I just see this happen a lot in the coaching world. So there is that element of competition, and also an element of hierarchy too, of like, we are the 7-figure coaches. We are the 6-figure coaches. We are that. And it's this interesting hierarchy of, and I understand it's like, why are celebrities friends with other celebrities? It's like only those types of people can understand their types of problems. So I get how business owners want to be friends with people who have similar business models as them and structures. But it can definitely feel cliquey and hierarchical, especially when I used to live in LA and like everyone was in that space. It was very focused on getting into certain friend groups.
That is so interesting to me. I've had a couple of clients who are, first I'll say that's so tricky. And I have a heart for what you just shared, because you do want to be able to bring your troubles to your friends without questioning, well, hold on a second. Are you going to use this information in some kind of way? Or are you just like hearing my heart right now and you want to be here for me, the woman? And it's hard sometimes when you mentally have to do the labor of like, okay, hold on, let me differentiate. Am I safe here? So I feel for you there for sure. It's funny because a lot of times I think when people hear of a friendship coach, they assume that the kind of person hiring me would be like a very socially awkward wallflower with no friends. And it's mostly high achieving, charismatic, successful women who say exactly what you just said. I'm in these spaces. I have friends galore, but I don't know. I don't trust some of them. I think I need to do a friendship pruning, or I'm so obsessed with my job that I turn around. I notice I don't even have friends because I'm so career driven. And so it's mostly charismatic women who are trying to figure out how to continue to elevate and thrive in soil that is conducive to their growth, not trying to bring them down. And I think with women, I know you cannot have a conversation about female friendship without talking about, competition. It's tricky because what we said earlier, woman to woman, I'm using you as a model of like how we navigate this world. Like, what it's like to be a woman navigating this world. And just because of that alone, I feel connected to you. And I do think we watch each other to determine standards, and maybe I do admire, like, man, I love the way she dresses. Man, I love the way she carries herself. And so we do kind of measure against each other to know, like, okay, how is she achieving womanhood? How is she walking in her womanhood and femininity? And I might be learning from that. I might be attracted to that because I want to be like that too in some ways. And you're a model for me. So I think there's so much of that, but I totally see how it gets blurry sometimes. And now I feel like I can't shine unless, if you're shining, it takes away from my shine, instead of seeing it as like a model or being able to genuinely be thrilled for you. And so it becomes kind of tricky. One suggestion I can give is, if you feel like you're meeting a new friend, she keeps bringing up the business stuff, to sometimes even say with a smile, like, okay, you know what? I feel like I want to take my coach's hat off with you and just like, can we just be no coaching stuff? I need a break, girl. So I'm joking, but I'm also assessing out from the beginning. Would you be interested in maintaining a friendship with me if I am not talking to you about my games this month and my podcast guests and the money and could you still enjoy me? Would you be able to go to lunch if we didn't take pictures and we didn't do video of us going to lunch? Would you be content with that? Because that right there, if you'd feel like, man, I really want to get a picture together of us at lunch. Why? So I like to kind of ask those questions in the beginning to suss out, oh, you're here for me because you think I'm funny or because we have a lot in common and you enjoy talking to me. But, that could be one little tester in the beginning to see if somebody's interested in getting to know you because of your light. There's something intriguing about you and they want to just like gradually unfold more and more about who you are as a person and to build something meaningful together, as opposed to somebody who sees an opportunity, social mobility through you, as opposed to someone who sees you as a access to resources. And so kind of being observant in the beginning stages might be a little helpful to ensure that you can relax into being your full self without wondering if it's going to be weaponized or leveraged for something impure.
That's such great advice. And I've noticed too that when we go on an entrepreneurial journey, it's so much of our lives. So we want to make other friends who are also entrepreneurs and we want to talk about those things. And a lot of friendship groups I've noticed circle around like a mastermind, that we like get together to mastermind to talk about our ideas. And then what I think, and not just for myself, but for everyone I noticed in that, it was a little bit tricky to know, like, are we actually friends or is this friendship based off of talking about our business? Like if our businesses weren't there, would we all be friends? And I think that what you suggested of, talking about something besides business and seeing if they're still interested. And the sad thing is like, I know, and most of these circles I'm no longer part of because I don't live in LA anymore, But I know at that time, if I just showed up, because once I was in a mastermind circle and they're like, okay, what's your business thing? I'm like, I want to DJ and like host events. And they never invited me back to the mastermind. So it showed me, because I wasn't giving them what they wanted of like the numbers and the business and this and that, it was no longer of value for them in that way. And I think that's okay too. They were pretty clear of, we're bringing women together so we can be in business, talking about business together. And that was their expectation. And at least they were kind of upfront with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that exercise we talked about earlier with like the I am statements, to your point, I know some of us, we love our business. Like that's our baby. We're up at night thinking of ideas and jotting in our notes app before we forget, we're obsessed, and I get it. But maybe that's where some of us, if we want more meaningful relationships, is to answer those questions. I am blank. I am blank. Because what else are you other than coach, guide, entrepreneur? Because have you done anything to nurture that? Are you occupying spaces where that aspect of your identity can thrive? So maybe if you love to dance, are you going to dance classes? And we're not even talking business. People don't even know what you do. That way you're kind of nurturing all the parts of yourself that make you who you are, as opposed to always leading with coaching the business and things like that. And so, for some of us, that might help us to enjoy more satisfactory friendships if they're not necessarily predicated on what we can offer from a professional standpoint.
So good. So I want to talk about something you said about a friendship algorithm. What is a friendship algorithm?
Yeah. So that I definitely got from, Dr. Marissa Franco. She's the author of the book Platonic and just became a New York Times bestseller. So she's doing really well. And I admire this woman's knowledge so much. And she kind of talks about how, through life and your childhood and how you go through certain experiences, you design a certain algorithm. So kind of like how, when you're on social media, you like enough of the same types of things, you're training it. Oh, this is what you like. This is what you do. So this is what I'll show you more of. And so how are you operating in your friendships because of maybe things you've done in the past or you've experienced in the past? And how does that continually shape what you experience moving forward? For some of us, do we need to change our algorithm, become intentional about what we're pursuing, about the people we entertain? And how can that give us more authority in shaping the kinds of friendships that we enjoy?
I relate to being in a stage of my life when literally I had to change my algorithm like 180 degrees, both like literal my algorithm on Instagram because it was all like food stuff. But then also that time of my life, I had to go through a massive friendship change because, I was changing who I am. So sometimes it's like, you got to unfollow all the old friends, all the old accounts, and like, be like, who is this new version of me and what is on their algorithm? And then sometimes it's like the little tweaks, the reorganization. Do you suggest to people to actually write out like the tiers of my friends? Like, these are my inner circle. These are my close friends. These are my acquaintances. These are my once a year friends. And like, how would you label that?
What's funny is if you asked me that like 3 years ago, I'd be like, no, don't write down your friends. Like your friends are just, now that I've seen like the research and I talk to women every week, I'm like, oh my God, yes, do that. Here's why. There is a concept known as Dunbar's number. And the idea is that you can only cognitively maintain 150 social connections. So you might have 1 million followers, but in your brain, it hasn't evolved that much.
And that includes like celebrities you follow, influencers.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about like people who like we have this, like more personal connection with. Okay. So like, even if it's from like my super, super, super close friends to the barista I see like 3 times a week, or like my boyfriend's cousin, like people in my mind to like, I know 150, right? So if you imagine that as like a really large circle, 150, and then smaller and smaller concentric circles inside of that to represent a closer range together, but also like fewer people. Then when we get to the smallest number in the middle, the number is 5. The idea is that your brain can only handle 5 super close relationships, which kind of makes sense when we think about what goes into cultivating super close friendships. Time, energy, you're remembering things about them, you're showing up. That's a lot. But a lot of us want to go wide instead of going deep and are wondering why we're unsatisfied. So, ironically, you would think that I'd be more concerned about introverts saying, like, I don't know if I have fulfilling friendships because they're like awkward and shy is the stereotype we put on them. I actually get more on high alert for extroverts bragging about all the people they know. because it's not possible to fill up 20 buckets and maintain something close with 20 people. It's just not, because you have a limited amount of time and energy. And so your tight circle, who would those people be? And get this, they argue that, if you have room for 5, that once you have a romantic partner, that person takes up 2 of the 5 spaces because of what's required to invest in a
Do
really
your parents count, like a parent or sibling?
You know what? I would argue yes, because I know we're saying like friends, but like people who are the closest in your life who you pour into, right? Now, here's the thing is, outside of that circle, it's the number is 10 to 15 of what we call weak ties or loose ties. So people who maybe you're not super close with, but you enjoy them well enough and you guys hang out and they definitely offer value in your life. You need them too. Because I do hear people say like, you know what? I just need my 1 or 2 ride or dies and I'm good. And I understand what they're saying, but no, you need other people, kind of like fringe friends as well, that I refer to as, because they offer value as well. There's research that shows that, engaging with your fringe friends boosts your mood. Like talking to a girl, we're not super close, but I really like her. That boosts my mood for the day. It's also that they found that you're more likely to find a new job opportunity through somebody in your fringe friends tier, because they also have their foot in a circle that's different from you. So me and all my tight friends, we probably run in the same circle. We know the same things. We have access to the same resources. But for somebody who's not as close, who also kind of dips in other spaces, she has access kind of to another world that she brings into my life. So she offers me a set of new things that my tight circle can't, because we're so on the same wavelength. And so that's why they said they were so concerned about our friendships during the pandemic, because we lost a lot of our weak ties and we need them too. And so when it comes to writing down your friends, I do encourage women who are like your 3 to 5 women. If I have, I often hear women say like, gosh, I don't even have that many. What does that say about me? I don't have 3 to 5. Well, put on the list women who you intentionally are curious about. Like you likely you've had some exchanges and you'd like to deepen things with her. Put her on the list and then put that somewhere visible. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get so caught up in work and maintaining your Insta and doing all the things that you don't feel close to anybody. Because you're trying to be close with everybody and check off coffee with all these people and still feel like you are not experiencing platonic intimacy with anybody. Well, it's because you have a limited number of hours. You need to use them strategically. So yes, go to coffee with one of the fringe friends and have a good time. But you really need to prioritize your 3 to 5 if you want depth, instead of being so concerned with being networky with 40 people. It's just numbers. It's just math. I'll wrap with this. Friendship expert Shasta Nelson says that you need 3 things to have depth in your relationships: positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And you cannot do that with everyone. You just can't. And so writing down those 5 women who you're like, I want to be intentional about pursuing them, loving on them, asking what's going on in your life, share of myself with them. I want to be intentional about doing that. She tells me she has a doctor's appointment next week. I'm putting it in my calendar to remind future me to ask her, girl, how was your appointment? To leave an emotional impression on her, like, wow, she remembered, she cares, because I want to nurture a bond with you, because I know I can't duplicate this 10 or 20 times. You matter to me. Now, if over time that circle changes because it's a little fluid, that's okay. That's to be expected, in fact, because research says that we replace half of our friends every 7 years. I know 7 has a very symbolic, kind of meaning, but you're going to have a natural friendship pruning every now and then as you grow in these cycles. It just makes sense that not everyone can come along for the ride. And so that's normal for your circle to change. But if you want to have more depth in your friendships, I think women should take your advice. Write those women down, those names, put them somewhere where you can see them, to remind you to be intentional about pursuing depth with women who add value in your life. It's not just going to happen by serendipity. It happens because you are intentional.
Positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. Those were the 3 things for depth, right? So,
and I like to say, like, what can be the tangible thing that you do to nurture each one of those? That's the exercise we do. So positivity, no, we're not saying toxic positivity and like, oh, everything will work out. But like, that, there's research that says successful relationships have a positivity to negativity ratio of 5-1. This was research conducted by the Gottmans. Okay. So when I take an aerial view, like in a helicopter, and I look down at my friendships, how many of our interactions are full of us constantly complaining, venting, dumping all the time? Now, yes, one benefit of friendship is I can take my burdens to you and just run my mouth and pop off sometimes. That's a benefit. But if that is the whole of our relationship, I mean, it's going to impact how close we feel to each other because I'm using you to just get out all my stuff, my nasty stuff. So 5-5 or 5-1, what's your positivity ratio looking like? And what one thing can you do to infuse positivity with the ladies on the list? 3-5. What can I do to have some positivity with her? The next thing is consistency. I have a whole tirade prepared on low maintenance friendships. I feel some kind of way, but how can you see somebody with regularity to get a rhythm with them? And I know I'm going to see you or talk to you. I like to suggest here a friendship ritual. I know it sounds kind of formal, but like, how can I get guaranteed time with you so I know I'm going to see you? Maybe we go to trivia night once a month. Maybe we have a check-in phone call every Friday. That's our thing for 30 minutes, but consistency. And finally, vulnerability. That doesn't mean I'm dumping all my trauma on you the first time I met you, that's not what we mean. But the best way I've heard vulnerability described is I feel comfortable taking a risk being rejected. There's a chance I'll be rejected here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to offer it anyway. I'm going to share it anyway. Can I do that here? Because we do like people after they're vulnerable with us, research shows, and it does bring us closer together. So you can't trust that with everybody, but who are those 3-5 that you can start offering a little more and more and more vulnerability to create depth in your friendship? So when you see that it requires those 3 things, it shows you, ooh, I need to get intentional about who my 3-5 are that I'm going to do that with.
I know this episode is good, but so is this sponsor.
I am so excited to share with you an incredible Ayurvedic skincare product called Sahajin. So there are tons of different skincare products out there, but the thing is, most of them are not formulated with Ayurvedic principles. And if you're not aware of Ayurveda, it's the sister science of yoga based on the mind-body connection, which I am an expert in and a huge advocate of. So Lisa, who was recently on the podcast, her family's from Kerala, and she's also worked in pharma for many years. So she's merged science with Ayurvedic research to come together to create clinically proven and holistic Ayurvedic skincare products. I personally love the cleansing oil. It's so good at taking makeup off, dirt, SPF, as well as the ritual body oil for Abhyanga self-oil massage and the radiant serum for my glow. It has Triphala and Brahmi, which is so great for the skin. So if you want to try it for 20% off, head over to sahajin.com. That's spelled SAHAJAN.com. And you can use coupon code Sahara for 20% off and find that link in the show notes.
That is such great advice. And I think all of us are right now going to, if you're not yet, you're probably writing down, who are those friends in my life? And I think sometimes the new friends, the fringe friends, can feel like bright, shiny objects because you haven't had conflict with them, So it's like, you know what? I'm going to find these new friends and then new friends and new friends. And it like comes back to our point of navigating conflict, because those people who are in your inner circle, there are going to be points of contention. You are going to see each other's shadows. There are going to be tough conversations. And if you really want to have that depth, you need to be able to move through that.
100%. And there's research that shows that oftentimes the platonic intimacy you're looking for is on the other side of a little tension, not unnecessary tension, but how else do I learn that I can trust you? How else do I learn that we can problem solve together until we have like these moments of tension that we work through? And now on the other side, I'm like, man, okay, I understand her better. Oh, wow, I really see her now. I see her, right? Or I have more respect for her because she worked through that with me. And she apologized. I have more respect. Or she forgave me. I have more respect for her. So sometimes that closeness we're looking for is on the other side of a little conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes too, that conflict does lead to the end of the friendship.
That's true too.
I've had that happen. And then it's just like, you just have to accept that truth, and you can't force someone to be your friend. And I think it's really tough because that core wound for so many of us is that abandonment wound. If I speak my truth, I might be abandoned. And sometimes that does happen, but that just means the friendship was not true to begin with, or at least things changed and now it's no longer in alignment.
Yeah. So how were you able to move on after you've had these separations with friends?
Yeah, I think for me, at the beginning, it's so hard, like, because I tend to be more on the anxious side. So I want to fix the problem. I want to talk about it. I want to get on the phone. I want to know how you're feeling. Like, that's how I process things more. And this other friend was more on the opposite side, the side that didn't want to talk. So for me, I'm like that first week of like not talking, I'm like writing a million notes that I like want to send her. And I'm like, don't send, like honor her space. And at the end of the 1 week, she decided that this was the same triage friendship. And she said that this friendship is no longer serving her, and she was in a new relationship, and she had moved, and she was just in a different space of her life. And the friendship just felt like too much work for her, because we were voice noting a lot. And some people, we were voice noting each other every day. What was going on? What was happening? We were giving each other advice. And she's like, I can't be in this container anymore. So it definitely felt like a breakup, like I was rejected. Why doesn't this person love me? Which makes me, you go through all the emotions, like you go through the anger, you go through the grief, you go through the sadness, especially this was someone that was in my life very closely for 5 years. And then eventually the acceptance and, like, as you're saying this, I'm like, oh, like maybe I should try to rekindle it based off of what you've shared. But yeah, how do you know when to just be like, you know what, that just served its time versus like, oh, maybe we did prematurely end the friendship?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I think the pandemic especially had a lot of us thinking back to friendships like, oh my God, like, should I revive that? A couple of things, one, if the friendship was, toxic in any kind of way and you made the decision to end it because it was so dysfunctional, it's going to be natural sometimes to miss a person who was so integrated into your life. But ask yourself if you're reaching out because you miss them, because the two don't necessarily go together. You can miss them because they were so important to you, but also say, I don't think it's good for me that I revive that and breathe new life into that. We ended it for a reason. So, are you acting out of a sense of nostalgia or yearning for the past? That's one thing to consider. I think you should also consider how much time has passed, because one very real possibility is that the person you're trying to reconnect with is not the same person you knew 7 years ago. Like, so we all know it. If you look back at 5 years ago, 7 years ago, are you the same, or have you shifted in some ways? So the anticipation that you'll be meeting or reuniting with old her, it's possible she's not her anymore. If you have a reason for reviving it, I think, you can reach out and say, with very clear purposes, what it is you want. I think a lot of times when we do rekindle, we're like, hey, I was thinking of you, thought I'd reach out. And the other person on the receiving end is going to inevitably wonder, what do you want? Are you trying to say something to me? Do you want something from me? So if you do decide to rekindle, I think you need to think about the other person and be as clear as possible about your objective to remove any ambiguity. So whether it's, hey, I never, I know it's been a while, but I never got to say my piece, and I need you to know that I felt blah, 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 blah. And if you respond, great, but I needed you to know that. That's one thing that you might need for closure. Okay. It might be because you do want to open it back up and you tell her, hey, I've been thinking about you a lot. You've been on my mind. I wanted to check in and see if you're well, how you're doing, and be prepared for all the possibilities. So I always say that if you don't think that you'd be mentally or emotionally okay with all of the possibilities, maybe hold off, because it's possible that she, one, does not respond to you. Is that going to drive you nuts? Two, it's possible that she does not respond to you kindly. Can you handle it? And then three, yeah, sure, it's possible that she's like, wow, I've actually been thinking of you too, and I'd love to get together. But if you don't think you're emotionally or mentally ready to absorb all those possibilities, then maybe hold off, because you cannot control another person's actions.
Yes, I love that point of that person. How are they going to perceive you reaching out of like, this person texts me out of the blue. Like, what do they want? And being very clear with that. And yeah, I think sometimes the saying your piece part, like sometimes you just write a letter and burn it, and it doesn't need to be said to that person. And then sometimes it does, and it can be a huge clearing, and we can only know that from each situation. So thank you for sharing that. And my last question for you is, how do we find new aligned friends. Even for myself, I moved to Miami less than 2 years ago, and I have a few friends here, but definitely not as much as in LA. And I think for a lot of us, we're at home, we work from home. And especially if you have like certain interests, and you're an entrepreneur, for example, it can be hard to just like go to the mall and like talk to anyone. So what is your advice for finding friends?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a quick punch list of all the different ways. The first is very unsexy, but it's to dig back in the friendship archives. Because a lot of times we say, I want to make new friends. And we use that synonymously with, I want to meet new people. And the two are not the same. So making friends, I always say, it refers to the art of cultivating something meaningful with another person. Who said that has to start from scratch all the time? A lot of times, a lot of our friends, they serve other roles in our life. So maybe it's also the woman we see weekly for our hairstyling. Maybe it's also the barista we see, or our friend's cousin who we see all the time when we all get together. So are there people in your life who you already know and you enjoy well enough, but you've written them off as a potential friend for whatever reason? And what would possibly change about the landscape of your future together if you started to entertain them as a possible friend? Would there be something there? So maybe look at who's already in your network, then reach back to people who you had one interaction with and it went well, but you guys like never kept it going. If you're confident that you both shared an enjoyment of your interaction together, to reach out and say, oh, I saw this and I thought of you, in that time we were in workout class together, and just wanted to reach out and say, I hope you're well, because we get busy. It's very possible they've been thinking of you too, or that they'd love a chance to reconnect and they're so relieved that you initiated it. So start with who you already know is the first thing. The second thing is to integrate routine into your life. That doesn't sound shiny, but a lot of us, we stay in the house all day and maybe go to a big event and then we come back home and then it's 4 more days before we go outside again. So how can you include routine into your life? That's why we feel like it was so much easier to make friends when we were younger, but it's really because we had opportunities for consistency. We saw the same faces all the time. Well, now that you're an adult, you're going to have to manufacture those opportunities for yourself because you no longer have that social infrastructure. So can I commit to working from the same coffee shop every Friday morning? Because we tend to be creatures of habit. So it's likely that there are other people who are going to be there every Friday morning. And now they become what we call familiar strangers. They're not totally strange to us. We kind of see them. I feel like we kind of give a head nod. I see you every week. And so now it becomes less intimidating to say hello or to ask you where you got your shoes or to borrow something from you, like a laptop charger or whatever, because we see each other all the time here, become a regular. If you go to the dog park, can you do it kind of around the same time? Because the same people come off, after work with their dog. And now we're building consistency. There's research out of the University of Kansas that attempted to quantify how long it takes to make friends. They found that it takes 50 hours to make kind of like a really close associate, 90 hours to make a good friend, and 200 hours to make a best friend. Now, sometimes people like lift their eyebrow in suspicion, like, wait, 200 hours? So I think it varies from person to person, but the key takeaway is the same. If you are trying to make friends, you're going to have to invest time. You're going to have to clock hours together. That's why so many of us make friends at work. We're together for 40 hours a week. And they just become our work friends, become our besties, So how can you manufacture that for yourself? Become a regular somewhere. Do things with consistency. If you go to some kind of book club meeting or some kind of entrepreneur or whatever, can you commit to going for 3 months? And if you hate it, then don't go. Or 3 times and then don't go. But we go one time and we're like, I don't know. I didn't find my people here. I don't know. I'm not going back. And so you don't have a chance to build any rapport with people there. You kind of went as a critic. You went to see if people come talk to you. You were on your phone half the time. And then you're like, wasn't feeling it. And you leave. But if I commit to saying, you know what, I'm going to go every Thursday for 3 weeks before I quit on this. Now I have an opportunity to say to somebody, oh yeah, you mentioned last week that your dog is sick. How are things going out? But I can build with you because I'm seeing you multiple times. That's one way to make friends, is just consistency. It's not sexy, but it works. Another is to talk to your super connector friends. These are people who love saying like, oh my gosh, Danielle, you should meet my friend Tiffany. You guys would hit it off. Like those people. They don't have to be your friend, but somebody who has that spirit. Why not text them or DM them and say, something to the effect of, hey, I'm trying to get connected and I thought of you because you're always out and about and doing something cool. Do you know of anything around town that you feel like is worth checking out? You won't get your need met if you don't make your need known. So if you're hiding your secret desire for friends to yourself because you feel shame around wanting friends, you feel like it makes you look desperate and clingy, so you're not going to tell anyone, how in the world do you expect to connect with people if you're scared to initiate and you don't want people to know? I mean, come on. Every study we're looking at for the past couple of years shows that we're lonelier than ever, most people. So it's likely that if you're in a room full of people, you're not the only one who's kind of desiring connections. They all are. So yeah, there's a risk you're going to get rejected, but there's an equal risk you'll be accepted. And so you have to put yourself out there. You have to believe you have something to offer, and you have to just start by saying hello. I always say that friendship begins with rapport, and rapport begins with hello. But you're not just going to fall on friends if you won't go out there and connect with other people. And I think that might be kind of the beginning mindset to positioning yourself to create meaningful connections.
Such great advice. And I know we've all been there. We've gone to an event. We're like, I'm going to go and make friends. And then we feel like, does everyone know each other already? They all seem to be talking. Like, I don't want to just like interrupt their conversation. So then we end up just standing there being on our phone. And then someone's probably looking at us thinking the exact same thing of, oh, this person's on their phone. They're busy. Let me not go up to them. And that's why having spaces where people are just really, because every time I've been in a conversation, even if it was like we were really in it and someone showed up, it's always been welcome. Like I've never felt like, oh, like, why is this person here? It's always been welcome. But for some reason, we feel like I'm going to interrupt their flow and be rejected or whatever the story is. So I think it's so important to recognize, like, it always just, even if you were in a conversation, a third person comes in, you just tell them, hey, we were just talking about this, and you bring them into the conversation. And sometimes the person kind of ends up more in the listening position, but sometimes they offer their feedback and you have an even more dynamic conversation. So I think that fear of just like, oh, well, everyone's busy or knows each other, we need to just move through that. And for me, a huge way of finding friends throughout my life has been through going to events. So like literally going on eventbrite.com and like searching different keywords of things I was interested in at the time, whether it was ecstatic dance or shaman or whatever else, and going to these events and just meeting people that I would have never met had I not gone to this event and been around people who were interested in that same thing. I'm in an improv class right now. And yes, and it's been like the highlight of my week. Every single week, I am obsessed with it. And now this improv crew has become my friend. And these are people that I normally would not have interacted with at all. Like one guy's like an investment banker, another guy works at Wendy's. Like it is the most random crew of people, but we all come together and we are just laughing the whole time. And it feels so good to have these friends that we can send comedy skits to each other, and we're on this shared mission. So I think having, you know, going to an event and bonding over a shared interest is also such a great way of making friends.
I love that for you. And I so love that you just shared that, because I hope there's someone listening who are like, wait, what? Because it does seem so random, but I love that you had the courage and intention to put yourself in a space where you can laugh, try something new, meet new people is amazing. And for women especially, the number one thing they found that is a predictor of platonic intimacy for women is laughter. So finding a woman who you can like laugh with right off of the bat, you're positioning yourself to be inclined to be super close to her. So I think the improv thing might be a great idea because it kind of fast tracks you to feeling comfortable. Laughter, I mean, there's so much research on laughter is so important. So I love that you just like that you're having that experience. That's amazing. Between the banker and the Wendy's guy, like that's amazing.
Yeah. And because the reason why it came to be is because I noticed in my friendships, it's often like you meet up for coffee. One person takes the turn of talking about all their problems. Then the other person takes the turn talking about their problems. And you kind of leave feeling a little bit heavier. And especially for someone like me, who's an empath and a coach, is like, then I'm like thinking about their problems. I'm trying to problem solve for them. And I'm like, sure, like sometimes you just need to talk about your shit and be heard. And that's an important part of friendship. But I'm like, I also want to be creating things with my friends. So I started to just get people together and be like, we're going to paint pumpkins and this is what we're doing, or we're going to make gingerbread houses, or we're going to do improv skits. And every time I would do improv skits, like it would just bring the group together in just such a beautiful way and connect us with our inner childs. And we were all just laughing. And it made me connect with people in a way that just like talking about like what's reporting. I feel like so much of friendship is just like, I'm going to report to you, you're going to report to me, rather than like playing the way that we used to have play dates with people. So I was like, kept trying to get people together to do improv. And I'm like, you know what? Let me just sign up for an improv class where like, this is the intention of the people rather than me trying to like turn people into my improv friends. And it has been a great decision.
Okay, that's amazing. And I've heard a couple people now talk about improv, and I've even recommended it to clients.
You need to do it.
I'm going to do it. That's so inspiring. I love it.
Any like local comedy club where you live will probably have an improv class, but I just found it on Eventbrite. First, I went to an improv show, and then at the show, they said that they had classes, and I was like, and at first I was like, it's 3 hours a week. Like, no way I can commit to this. And, you know, all my stories were coming up. And now I'm like, I'm so grateful that I said yes to this, because not only just in friendships, but it's allowed me to access a new side of myself. And I feel like ultimately that's really what friendships are. You're really getting that mirror back of who you are.
That's so good. That's like a mic drop. Yes, absolutely to everything you said. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. And another thing too is I've noticed sometimes people are like waiting for someone to make the initiative of like a group activity or something like an arts project or a holiday thing. But for some people, it comes more naturally to others. I will say I tend to be just that person. Maybe it's like my Capricorn in me, but every time I do it, everyone's like, thank you for just taking the initiative, for putting it together. And I think we're all just like waiting for those moments that you see on TikTok that you're like, wow, friends do that together. Like, I wish my friends did that. And it's like, be the friend who organizes it, because that's the only way you're going to make it happen in your life.
That's so good. You know, I was actually thinking about that this morning. I know, I'm a former high school teacher, and I taught, 17 and 18-year-olds. And so it's funny because sometimes people ask me like, oh, do you find that, women are like, high schoolers and the drama? And I'm like, you know what? The one way I found that adults are just like high schoolers is we're scared. That's how we are like children. We're still scared of putting ourselves out there, asking for help, telling somebody we like them. We're still terrified. And, there's just so much to be said about initiating. There's research that says we tend to underestimate how much people appreciate us reaching out to them. There's another research study that says we tend to underestimate how much people like us in the first interaction. It's called the liking gap. So we'll meet someone and then we don't want to initiate after because we're like, oh, I probably talks too much. And she walked away liking you just fine. So really look at your assumptions of other people. I always ask clients, who told you that? Like, you told you that, so who told you? She's probably too busy. She probably thinks I'm a little weird. You told you that. And so is there a chance that she is busy? Sure. But there is an equal chance that she's like, man, I'm so glad you reached out. And when it comes to initiating, I'll say this, two things. One, it has to be a part of your identity. So instead of saying, man, I really want to reach out to this girl, but what if she says no? That's rooted in her reaction. It's very reactionary. Instead, tell yourself, time out. I'm a connector. Like, that's who I am. I really value connecting with other people. That's me. And that way, when you initiate, it's an extension of who you are. It's not a performance you're doing. This is who you are. You wave first at people. You pick up the phone and say, hey, do you want to get wine tonight? That's who you are, as opposed to, oh, it feels weird trying that on. I don't know if I'm that person. I don't know if I can do this. No, if you value connection, what behaviors are you doing that are an extension of your beliefs and your values? And you just go for it. And the last thing I'll say is, you will not just initiate the beginning of a friendship. To keep a friendship going, initiative maintains it. You will always be having to say, do you want to get together next week? You might always have to initiate being the first to be a little open when you get together for coffee and you want to share something personal, but you're the first to go, so the best friendships are made up of initiating. So don't start your friendship journey by waiting for others to come to you. There's a little bit of that's a little arrogant to think that you should show up in a room and not people are going to clamor to you. If I'm being honest, okay, you have a part to play too. And if you want to create and maintain better friendships with women, you better get comfortable with going first, because that might be exactly what you need to start enjoying the friendships that you deserve.
So good. I loved all of this. This is one of my favorite conversations ever. This had just so much wisdom. And I'm sure people are taking notes. And if not, re-listen to this and take some notes and bookmark it for life, because we've literally gone through every situation pretty much that friends can move through. So thank you just for your responses and like how well thought out and innovative and fresh they are. Like, I just love listening to you talk, and I love having this kind of conversation because I think it's so needed. And we often just negate friendships and think, oh, like that should just be the easy part of my life. And we don't recognize that it also, like anything else, like your health, like your relationships, like your career, it also requires work and effort and diving into. So thank you for stepping into your dharma, your soul's purpose of being a friendship coach and making this accessible for more people. And I know you have a book coming out too. So can you tell us about that and what you're working on?
Yeah. So I have a book coming out. It's not until 2024. My editors just told me, I was like, oh my God, I'll be like 77 by then.
They wait so long. It's like,
I'm learning.
Get it out.
I'm learning. Yeah. So that the book is tentatively titled Fighting for Our Friendships, the Art and Function of Conflict in Female Friendship. And my goal with the book is not just to tell you, if this situation happens, do this. If this happens, do this. Even though there's going to be a lot of that on there, a whole guide to the top 14 conflicts I've seen between women. But I want to answer, why does that keep happening? Why do I feel like she betrayed me? Why do I feel like I bond with this happening and I need this to feel connected to somebody? Why? So I'm not just telling you what to say in certain situations, but I want to explain to you how the whole operation works, the mechanics of female friendships, so it can inform how you engage with other women. And so I'm so excited about it. And I hope that it's helpful. I've learned so much. I've been humbled in doing research. My friendships are better. Surprisingly, my marriage is better since I started doing this work, because I've noticed that friendship is at the heart of romantic relationships. You have to be my friend, you know? And so I'm a better person for it. I'm so honored to have women trust me with some of their most personal, intimate, women issues. Is just such a blessing. And I'm honored to do this work. And so, everything lives at betterfemalefriendships.com, but I'm so grateful to you for carving out space to have this conversation.
Well, thank you again. We will link to your website below. I know you do different coaching with people. I think that this is such an important area to really dive into. So thank you again for really focusing on it. And your TikTok is amazing. So everyone go find her on TikTok. I will share that link below as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am obsessed with that conversation. I actually went on for another hour just talking to her off the air because it was so good. And it's so needed to have conversations about female friendships, because it's like water, without them, you feel dehydrated, you feel parched, but sometimes that water got muck in it and you're drinking it and you're wondering why you're not feeling more hydrated. And it's because that water got muck and you had to filter it out for the water to actually be genuinely hydrating. And it's the same thing with female friendships. You might have friends in your life, but they're not really nourishing your soul. So you're like, how come I'm spending time with these people, but I feel worse after? And that just means that friendship is either not in alignment for you, or there's work to do there. Because it's like, imagine you left your relationship every time things got hard. You would never make it to the most beautiful parts of your relationship. And I agree with Danielle that sometimes we do prematurely throw friendships away when it could have just taken more deepening in that moment. And sometimes we hold on for friendships too long when that was us like 10 versions of ourselves ago. And there's so many nuances there. So that's why I created Rose Gold Goddesses, my sacred feminine mystery school. We have 1,000 members who are all here for the joyful, divine feminine approach to spirituality that's all about the heart. We have community support circles, weekly workshops, monthly goddess circles, and so much more. So if you're interested and curious, I'll put the wait list for that beneath. And that's such a powerful way to make friends. We also have an annual retreat that you can go on. And in that annual retreat, we all get to meet each other in person, be in circle, really talk and share. And it's so deeply beautiful. So be sure to head over to the show notes below to check that out. And I'm so grateful for you to be here. And if you loved this episode, I would love for you to leave a review. And as a free gift, I will send you my womb meditation. So this is a meditation for you to connect to your sacred womb space, to hear her answers, because the feminine approach to spirituality is about connecting into the body and not leaving the body and being in the mind. So you can leave a review over on the iTunes store, take a screenshot of it and email it over to me at sahara@iamsahararose.com. You can find that link also in the show notes, and I'll email you my free womb meditation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Namaste.